Hello and thank you for joining us. We are MBS Academy. Our mission is to bring digital technology close to all professionals. We teach business professionals how to use digital technologies and manage digital risk to be familiar and comfortable with them. Some of our programs include Foundation of Digital Transformation, Artificial Intelligence, Auditing Digital Risk, Big Data Analytics, to name a few. I'm Tony and I'll be your co-host for today. There are a few members of our team with us. Jessa.
Hi everyone, I am Jessa from Manila, Philippines, and I am the producer of the online sessions.
Methany.
Hi everyone, I'm Medini from Malaysia and I handle the polls.
And Mario.
Hi everyone, I'm Mario from Brisbane.
Thank you. In this session, we'll be talking about developing the leadership capabilities of technology professionals Snapshot. And our speaker for today is Joe Stewart Rattray. Joe has over 25 years of experience specializing in consulting in technology issues with a particular emphasis on governance in both the commercial and operational areas of businesses. Joe provides strategic advice to organizations across a number of industry sectors, including banking and finance, utilities, manufacturing, tertiary education, retail, and government. And now, Joe, please take the session forward.
Thank you very much, Tony. Hello, everyone, and good evening. I'm going to share my screen with you now. Bear with me. So we're going to tonight talk about very briefly developing the leadership capabilities of technology professionals. This is actually part of either a 1 or 2 day course that MBS offers. So just remember that when we're going through, it'll be a whistle stop through some of the most important things about leadership. So I seem to be having trouble advancing my slide, but there you go. Just a little bit about me, just so as you can see my background. I've got quite a long background in leadership. I've sat on a number of boards and committees across the world, and I've led a women's leadership initiative across the world also. So I think these slides will be available to you, so you can always look at this stuff later, but let's get on to the guts of the story first of all. Some of the things I'm going to talk to you about tonight is introducing the psychology of leadership very briefly, exploring leadership styles, because we each have a style, and building team cohesion and fostering trust within that team, which is a really important thing to do. Self-mastery for leadership and balance, and also investing in yourself, excuse me, and well-being. So let's start with the psychology of leadership. One of the things that I like.
Your slides are not advancing on my screen.
Oh, they are advancing on my screen. I wonder why that would be.
Which window, if you have more than one window, they should be, you should select the one to share.
I only have, let me just escape out of the slides. I only have one window open.
Yeah, I think because you're in the slideshow mode.
Right. So let's see if I can advance it now for you. Is it advancing?
Yes, I think, no.
No.
No, it's not. Okay.
Can anybody else see them advancing?
No.
No?
And the other option, which I generally use, is actually get out of the slideshow mode and just present as they are. But you hide the the upper kind of the top bar, with the small arrow on the right.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So
Yeah,
just do it like that.
just do it like that. And yeah, and
Okay.
get out of slide mode, slideshow. Yeah.
I am out of the slideshow mode now. All right, let's see if this works, shall we?
Yeah. Just increase the size a little bit more.
Yeah. You hide the notes section at the bottom.
Okay.
You just minimize that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to minimize that, chaps. This is awful. I hate this.
No, this is marvelous actually, because if technology worked every time, there's no need for us.
Oh, that's a very good point, I suppose. That's a very good point.
There you go. Yeah, right there.
There we go.
Perfect. Now we can see your pretty face and also your lifelong accomplishments.
Oh, you are a nice man. You are a nice man. Okay, so here we go. So there's my lifelong accomplishments. And let's move on from there, shall we? Because we don't really want to talk about all of those. So as I said, let's have a quick look at the things that we're going to look at. We'll look at all of those things. Psychology of leadership very briefly, leadership styles, building team cohesion and fostering trust. Oh, and my slides have just decided to die again. We'll get there, guys. We'll get there. Can you see the slides advancing now?
Yes.
Oh, we can. Yes.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so this is where we were back to before. So we're looking at all of those things, as I mentioned before. We'll be looking at self-mastery for leadership and balance. We'll be investing in yourself is an important topic to talk about too, as is well-being. One of the things I like to do is I like to also think about those, reflect on those leaders who have been exceptional. So I like this quote very much. If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, then you are a leader. And that was John Quincy Adams, who was President of the United States. So he was definitely a leader. And, I'm a great believer in the notion of dreaming big and believing. So this really resonated with me, as I hope it does with you. Also, if we did defining managerial leadership as opposed to leading a country, we need to think of it as being a joint and indeed interactive function that involves both leaders and followers, which takes place in a variety of contexts, and those contexts depend on the kind of business that you might be in. One of the things also that we have to consider is we need to reflect on the difference between being a boss and being a leader. Now, being a boss is somebody who's quite autocratic and is going to tell you what to do and crack that whip and the slaves working. Well, that doesn't really work very well, I don't find. I find it's better to be a leader, to be a part of the team. Yes, you are leading that team, but you are actually prepared to roll your sleeves up and work with the team to achieve goals. So in other words, leadership includes other people. Leaders do need to motivate and influence, as well as occasionally we do still have to direct. That's life. Team members, as I said, it's important that we have the roles of leaders and followers, and the followers, the team members, really need to be willing to accept direction from a leader. So that's important as well, that the leader fosters that kind of environment where people want to work with them. Leaders who are successful in one context are not always successful in other contexts. So what do I mean by that? Well, I could be a really good leader of technical people, but when it comes to the strategic part of leadership, I might not be very good leading in that context because I'm out of my comfort zone and I really don't feel comfortable in that kind of leadership role. And that's perfectly acceptable. Not everybody is going to be successful in all kinds of leadership. And if I'm leading a group of technologists, I might not be particularly good at leading the country, but who said I wanted to be the Prime Minister anyway? Also, there are managers and there are leaders. That's, you know, you often hear those terms used together, but the reality of that is that we often do have, differing roles. Managers and leaders can be quite different. I think, Jessica, have you just taken control? Jessa, have you taken control of my screen? Because I can't advance it and I have a message saying, waiting for Jessa to control your screen. Okay, I'm going to move on. I'm going to keep talking while the technical glitch gets resolved behind the scenes. One of the things that we need to be really aware of is the fact is that there are different kinds of leadership styles, as I mentioned earlier, and we each have a leadership style of our own. See if I can move this screen. There you go. There are 4 recognised leadership management styles: laissez-faire, democratic, bureaucratic, and autocratic. And the interesting thing is, we all generally have a bit of all of those in us. But what do they actually mean? Well, laissez-faire is, you know, pretty laid back. It means that I'm pretty much hands off and I let the team get on with the job themselves. Well, that could be advantageous, right? But also in other respects, oftentimes individuals really need their leader to lead, really need to make some of the decisions for them. So that's a really important one. If we look at democratic leaders, they have policies determined by the group. The group have discussions and they make decisions together. So the leader then consults the team before they make decisions while maintaining overall control still. So that sounds pretty good, right? Then there are bureaucratic leaders. Now, bureaucratic leadership is an interesting one. This is a far more formal approach, if you like, very business-like attitude in the workplace, respect, strict chain of command, which is also can be quite difficult to deal with sometimes. And they will always have the final say in every decision. The next one is autocratic. And autocratic is dictatorial, essentially. There is only 2 ways: the highway or the way that the leader chooses. So given that, which one would you prefer to be, do you think? I'm going to give you a clue that for me, I think I'm a little bit democratic, and I think I occasionally can be a bit bureaucratic when I need to be, and I try never to be an autocrat.
I can speak for myself.
You can speak for yourself. Excellent.
It's always my way, and I'll tell you why. Because, you know, when I feel that you know, I've done this before, I know what I'm talking about, and this is how it's meant to be done. Now I know this is a weakness, to be honest, but that's my natural inclination. That, hey, you know, I know how to do this. I've done this before. You know, you guys just follow me and you will be successful. But 9 out of times I fail to actually get people on board.
And that would be why. You've answered your own question.
Yeah.
Let's move on then about how you build team cohesion. It's really important to create a culture of what I call appreciation. So this is probably not comfortable for you because you need to be looking to praise individuals and the team as a whole. And really it's to create, and you need to not only create that culture, but you also need to maintain the culture. So that means that it requires of the leader a concerted focus on the behaviours and characteristics that you're wanting to achieve and wanting to live by, if you like, in your culture of appreciation. It's also about not just the leader praising individuals, but it's also about team members saying, great job, Tony. Thanks so much, Methany, for helping me with that. Mario, I really appreciated that document that you sent to me. That sort of stuff. And whilst you're praising the individual, it's always good to do it in public as well. If you have regular stand-ups or regular team meetings, that's the time to also call people out and just so the whole team can also celebrate that win, because I believe in celebrating wins in a team. It's really important. And be specific about it. Don't just say, oh, yeah, great work, Mario, but really say it was about that document. And what I really liked about that document was X, Y, and Z. The thing about doing this, though, is you need to make sure that you are absolutely sincere when you do this. It's no good. You have to be authentic. You have to be sincere. It's no point in you not being sincere when you give that kind of feedback, because people can see that very easily. Also, be careful of the frequency. You don't want overkill on this. You don't want to sound, you will sound insincere if you do it too often. And you know, everybody, when none of us are perfect, so we will make mistakes, and sometimes you will have to speak to your team members and have that bit of a chat with them about stuff. And that brings me to managing conflict. There will be conflicts in teams. Now, I never thought I would probably ever agree with Ronald Reagan, but to be honest, peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. It's a very strong statement, I think, and that's certainly one of the times that I do agree with Ronald Reagan. Conflicts, especially interpersonal conflicts, need to be dealt with quickly. You can't let these things brew, because you end up with a really bad feeling within the team. So you need to, as soon as you've discovered there is an issue, in an appropriate manner, you need to bring the team back on track and deal with it so as they can effectively meet the goals that they have to. There are generally considered two types of conflicts that arise in a group or a team environment. The first is task conflict, and the second is relationship conflict. Task conflict is usually about disagreements on how to proceed on something, or a disagreement on what tasks should be performed to meet the end goal, or indeed who should perform the task. Relationship conflicts, on the other hand, are about personal issues. It might be something that's arisen between two team members. They revolve around personal disagreements, for instance, or dislikes between individuals in a team. And let's be honest, we don't always love the people that we work with, but you don't have to work successfully with them. So you'll often find that second type, the relationship type, rarely has anything to do with the actual piece of work that you are undertaking at the time. But deal with them, have a look at it. How can you deal with it? Do you have to separate those two people? I mean, I know that we're talking about grown-ups here, but I actually have had to do that, where I've had to take two guys who were sharing an office and split them up because they used to fight like cat and dog, and it disturbed everybody else. And sometimes as a leader, you have to do that, but you have to do it in the most appropriate way for the setting that you are in. And never do it in public. Take the people aside and talk to them individually. Now, here's a little stress buster reflection. This is a little bit about perception. We all bring our own baggage along with us, right? And so we all have various ways of thinking about things. So, and unfortunately, there is a difference between female leadership and male leadership. And sometimes women are perceived to be aggressive rather than assertive. I've often been called bossy, but I've heard my male counterparts are being referred to as strong leaders. So that's different, right? Or I've said to be venomous, perhaps, but counterparts are again seen to be strong leaders. So that's the sort of thing that we often face. But one of the things we really need to do is realise that as leaders, what we need to do is get beyond that, and we need to be there to lift people up. as we can see Darth Vader attempting on one side of this slide. In fact, one of the most important things I think we all need to do as leaders is to bring people along, even the most negative person in the team. We need to bring them along for the journey, and that journey is towards team success. So one of the other things that's really important to do is to foster trust. And if it's always your way or the highway, then sometimes it's difficult to foster trust in a team, because for a team to perform well, the team has to not just trust one another. Even though you might not necessarily like someone, I can trust that person. I know that they will do what I need them to do when I need them to do it. And also, as a leader, you need your team to trust in you and your judgment. So everybody in the team needs to be able to speak openly and in a meaningful way to each other. And of course, you set some ground rules about how people speak to one another as well. There are some things that are not appropriate. I like to conduct what I call stand-ups with meaning. I had a team, I came into a situation with an organisation, a high-end tourism organisation, where the technology team had had very little leadership for a long time, and it was fragmented. So what I started to do, and they were under a huge amount of stress. So what I started to do was to have stand-ups every morning, 20 minutes. We'd get together, we'd bring our coffee along, and we'd literally have a chat. But we had a purpose. There was always a purpose to that meeting. And those stand-ups became the point where people felt that they could be really honest, they could vent, they could talk about the problems they'd had. It really became, we were operating on Chatham House rules. So what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, essentially. And it worked really well. And in fact, that fostered a trust, because everybody in that team realised that they could have those discussions and it wouldn't go outside the team. So that was a really important thing to do. And that team grew and developed into a really supportive environment. So my suggestion is have the stand up with meaning. And if you're under a lot of stress, like we've been during the COVID-19 issues, have a couple of stand ups a day if that really helps. And of course, stand ups now are just quick Zoom calls. If team members actually feel safe in that environment, like the team that I was leading in the tourism industry, then they're more likely to collaborate and innovate as well. They'll think about different ways of doing things, and they'll stretch one another as well, which is a really good idea. But discourage cliques within a team. You know, Mario and Tony suddenly are always in the corner having a coffee, having a bit of a chat, to the exclusion of the rest of the team. Try and discourage that if you can. And if you need to actually break it up and get people to work with others, then you do that. Also, the important thing about fostering trust is you don't play blame games. You don't say it was your fault. It's about creating a safe environment that somebody can come to you and say, Joe, I've made a mistake. I've really screwed this up. How do I need to talk to you about it. Don't blame them, but look at how you can resolve the issue and move on. It's really important. It seems to me like that's a 101, but the number of times I see teams pointing the finger at one another is just horrendous. The other thing about being a team leader is you are the leader. So you need to model behaviours that you want your team to follow. So if you want to be have a polite environment, if you want to have a relaxed environment, whatever it is that you want your team to follow, then make sure that you model that. If you want them to follow you everywhere, including through the puddles in the car park, because they are morbidly curious with what you are doing, then that's what you model. Put your Wellington boots on and go for that walk through the car park. And clear and open communication is really important as a leader. Doesn't mean you have to tell them everything, because there are some things as a leader you need to keep back. You can't tell people because it's something that's been entrusted to you. So that's the thing that you have to be very careful about, how much that you share. But what you do share must be clear and open, and you must have your door open and allow people to come in and have those discussions with you. It's really, really important. Professional self-mastery for balance in leadership. What does she mean? I've just said that you have to be essentially a role model, right? That you are leading by example. One of the other really important things is that you need to lead. By leading by example, I actually mean that. And one of the things that I've always said to my teams is that I will not ask them to do something I would not do myself. That got me into trouble once because I was working in security with a security consulting team, and we had a job come in where it was going to require the team to do some dumpster diving to see what they could find out about a particular organisation. And so one of my team said to me, so Jo, when was the last time you went dumpster diving? And it suddenly occurred to me, I couldn't ask them to go and get into a dumpster and go through the rubbish if I wasn't prepared to do it myself. So guess who put on the overalls, the rubber gloves and the Wellington boots and went and did it? Yep, that would be me. So lead by example, but make sure that you seriously lead by example. Don't ask your team to do stuff you wouldn't do yourself. The other thing is to be in charge of your emotions. Losing your temper is not cool. The other thing is, I've always had a saying, we don't cry in security. That doesn't mean that you don't go out into the car park sometimes and shriek very loudly, or indeed get in the car and go for a drive around the block, or go to the ladies' room and have a tear, or get on the phone and ring your best friend and scream at her, whatever, you know. But that is something that you might need to do to be able to express your emotion and how you feel. But don't do that in front of your team. It's not setting a really good not setting a good example. So part of self-mastery is ensuring that you're in charge of your emotions. And also when I talk about self-regulation, what I'm talking about is be careful about what you actually do say out loud, because if you say the wrong thing out loud, you know, we joke about that and say, oh, did I say that out loud? Sometimes if you say it out loud, it will come back and bite you bad. So be careful about what you say, really important. Also, one of the other things is that if you ask your team for feedback, and a good leader will ask for 360 feedback, it should be you give feedback to your team and they give feedback to you. One of the things about that is you're going to have to be prepared for the unpleasant feedback. One of the hardest things that happened to me when I had my very first strategic management role was when I suddenly realised that I was no longer being invited to go to lunch with the team. And when I said, why, you know, what's this about? This was kind of casual discussion, right? How come I'm not being invited to lunch? You're the boss and we don't go out to lunch with the boss. Kind of hurt a bit. So that's what happens. You make a change. You change from being a member of the team to being a team leader. And so when you are leading at the leading edge, you have to be prepared for things not to be the same as they were. And they might say to you, Jo, not really keen on the way that you do X, Y, or Z. You know, they will give you feedback on your performance as a leader. You don't give us enough information, or you give us too much information. You play favourites with Tony and not with Alexandra, that sort of stuff. Also, you need to be prepared to have the hard conversations with your team as well. And that's a difficult thing if you're a new leader. That's a case of making sure if you have to give somebody bad news, you prepare yourself for it and you have a box of tissues on the desk. And sometimes you have to let them, if there's a crying incident, you have to allow that person to cry, you push the tissues forward and you let them calm down and then you continue the discussion. Very difficult to do. And believe me, it's not just women who sometimes cry. So that's something to be aware of. You know, you have to be prepared for the hard discussions. It's about also learning to be authentic, and this is about being true to yourself as much as anything else. If you are open and honest, you'll get a similar response from others. So sometimes you will have to stand and fight, but when you do stand and fight, make sure you know the facts, right? Take the emotion out of it, because we don't cry in security. We don't get angry, but what we do is we take the emotion out, back up our position with facts, know the fights that you can fight, and know the ones that you have to walk away from. That can be a really, really difficult as well. But you will learn that by being yourself, and if you trust in yourself, you will develop the skills that you need to do that. The other thing is about setting boundaries for yourself. And this is in simple things. Some of those simple things can be, how late do I work? Well, you know, being the last one in the office at 10 o'clock every night is not necessarily the best thing for you, and it's probably not the best thing for your family either. And will that sacrifice actually make you more successful? I would suggest probably not. The other thing is too, you have to examine, what do you really want out of your leadership journey? Do you really want to be the CEO? Not everybody does. Not everybody wants to be a leader. You know, it's an interesting thing. I had a guy who worked for me a long time ago now, who was fantastic. He was great at what he did, and I actually wanted to promote him to the next level, to leadership, to his first leadership role. And when I went to called him into my office, and it was performance review time, and we went through it all, and I said, Rod, this is what I'd really like to do for you. I'd like to have your job reassessed, and I'd like to see if we can get it up to the next level. He looked at me with such a look of horror on his face and said, absolutely not, Jo, please don't do that. And the reason I don't want you to do that is I love doing what I'm doing, and I don't want to suddenly have to be responsible for budgets and people. And that really set me back on my heels, because I thought everybody wanted to get to that leadership level. The truth is, not everybody does. Self-belief. It's hard to lead a cavalry. It's hard to lead a cavalry charge if you think you look funny on a horse. And it would, wouldn't it? How could you be a cavalry officer charging into battle if you thought you looked funny on a horse? Adlai Stevenson was a presidential nominee for the United States. And I just loved that. I thought it resonated with me. So self-belief, what this is actually saying is you have to believe in yourself, believe in your own abilities. And as I said before, dream big and believe in what you can achieve, and that will rub off on your leadership style and indeed on your team as well. One of the things about leadership is that you do need to prepare to spend some time by yourself. And you need time to think about strategy, tactics, and indeed the management of your people. So sometimes you have to get that thinking space. At the moment, I know that I'm spending about 5 hours a day on Blue Jeans calls, and I'm not getting any of that thinking time. So what I've done is I've begun to redline my diary again, which is a practice that I've used for a long time. So redline my diary for an hour here, an hour there, so I can actually get that thinking done and get some of that strategy down on paper. So really good practice. Your door is open except when it's not. So that means, you know, really do redline your diary and allow yourself to have that time. And sometimes it means you do need to leave the office if you are in an office situation. Or, you know, I've been working from home now for 15 weeks. And what I will do is go out into the garden, take a walk through the vineyard, do something like that, just to clear my head and get the thought processes happening. And as a leader, that's a really important thing to do. Investing in yourself. What do I mean about investing in yourself? Well, we need to consider how we develop ourselves, how we develop our professional being, and indeed our emotional being too. But if we think about it in terms of investing in ourselves, sometimes it's about ensuring that we have the right credentials. Sometimes it's about ensuring we have the right education. I'll just let you read that. So why this cartoon? Well, I believe that you have to understand what you want from your career. That's really important. And how to progress from where you are now. What's the role that you're really aspiring to? Because clearly I'm not sure that that guy actually knows. If you understand that, planning your path to get to where you want to be is much easier. And indeed, understanding what professional development and education, that investment in yourself you'll need to undertake, becomes a whole lot easier also. So you need to invest in yourself, take the time to learn new skills, take those credential exams that you've been thinking about for years but haven't done it. In short, be the best that you absolutely can be, because you will be repaid dividends by what that does for your professional standing and your leadership. And some of the ways that you can invest in yourself is by finding the right professional development opportunities. And there are lots of ways, and these were just a few that I could think of. Was, industry associations often have functions or online events that you can attend. There are professional bodies that, like ISACA or the Australian Computer Society, or those global equivalents that offer credentialing, offer opportunities for you to learn more. Own time, own space kind of learning can be really valuable. Also explore networking opportunities as well. You'd be surprised. I talk about connections, and making connections in your career is really, really important. I tell the story that if I hadn't been a member of ISACA, and if I hadn't been attending a particular conference, and if I hadn't have hosted a particular lunch, I wouldn't have met a particular woman who wouldn't have given me the link to an opportunity that led me to the United Nations. And that was a lifelong dream of mine. So that exploring networking opportunities to look for those connections can be absolutely extraordinary. So I really recommend that. Also look at formal education and training opportunities as well. That's also important. And mentor and protege relationships. It's always a good thing to find a mentor. I've had mentors all of my professional career, and I still have a board mentor today who's been my board mentor for about 10 years. Someone who now I have the kind of relationship with that I can just ring him as a sounding board and say, look, I've got this problem. This is what I think. This is what I think the problem is, and this is what I think I should do about it. And sometimes he'll just say, no. That thinking is flawed. Go away and think about it again and come back to me. So sometimes it's a hard relationship. It's a bit of tough love. But you need to determine, if you're going to enter into a mentor-protege relationship, you need to understand what you want out of that relationship. Again, it's about you. This is all about you and your development. So what do you want out of the relationship? What is the goal that you have for that relationship? That's really important. The other thing, oftentimes in your workplace, in some government departments or large organisations, for instance, there are opportunities to be seconded to different units. Those career development and progression opportunities, certainly jump on those as well if they're there for you, because it shows that you're keen and you want to progress, and it does give you an opportunity to learn a whole range of different things. I have a colleague who very, very good at what he did. And he said no 2 or 3 times to an opportunity to act in a higher position, which was in a government executive role, which quite honestly would have been a great move forward for him. He didn't do it. And as I said, 2 or 3 times he said no to it. So it actually took him 10 years to progress to a chief security officer type role from where he was. And I think, quite honestly, had he taken those opportunities earlier, that would not have been the case for him. So don't stymie your own development. Make sure that you really are invested in it, and you have the time to put into it as well. That's the other thing. One of the other things too is that you seriously need to, to me this is a very important reflection. At the end of the day, you need to determine what personifies the type of leader that you would follow. Who would you follow? the superhero like these two, young, dynamic, powerful. Think about what it is, the kind of leader that you would follow, and see if that's, and do a bit of a reality check on your own leadership style and see if there are holes that need to be filled. Personal well-being. Now, a lot of people go, yeah, what's that got to do with my leadership style or learning to be a leader, developing my capabilities? Well, it's really important. Never abandon family and friends for work. There may be a dire emergency at work that you've got to deal with, and that happened to me over the weekend. I had something that was going on that really could not be dealt with any other way than me being involved with it. If that happens to you, make sure that you keep the family in the loop as to what's happening. When it comes down to it, none of us know how long we have our family and friends for. So we need to make sure that, yes, we have a leadership trajectory, but that we don't forget our family and friends. This photograph was taken about 2 years ago in my back garden. And of that group of people, one couple have divorced, one person has died, one person had a life-threatening illness, and another person has been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So we don't know how long we have them for. So always consider that extra time in the office. Is it absolutely necessary? Do I need to work on the weekend? Can I do this some other way? Important to make sure that family and friends are there. We do need cheer squads, and they're generally our cheer squads. So another thing that's kind of important is to be a success as a leader. It's all about having a balance, and that balance is about having balance in your life, and that balance in your life brings with it a sense of well-being. And that well-being is a combination of physical well-being, mental well-being, emotional well-being, and that family and social health component that we talked about. So that all of that goes together to be well-being. And as a leader, we need to model what we want to see in our team. We do not want our team dropping down from too much work and not enough play. You know, it's about work-life balance. But I have to tell you a funny story about that. About 3 or 4 years ago, I was asked to do a presentation on work-life balance. And so a group of professional women I was going to be presenting to. And so I went home and told my husband what I was going to be doing, and I was really excited about it. And he just roared laughing. And I looked at him and I said, excuse me, what seems to be your problem? And between gasps of laughter and tears, he said, I can't imagine you speaking about something like that. He said, I don't actually know what you know about that. He said, because you only have 2 speeds, full throttle and complete stop, asleep on the sofa. And, you know, unfortunately, there was a modicum of truth in that, and it made me realise, it actually made me sit up and take a little bit of an audit of my life and how I do things. And so it really did make me realise that I needed to make sure that I changed the way I did things too, because that I inadvertently was modelling that was okay behaviour, and we shouldn't do that. You know, I remain committed to my career and my board and committee commitments, but I now just pay a little bit more attention to my own well-being and the importance of spending time with family and friends. Now, I'm just going to wrap up here some of the things that I think are really important that we need to take away from tonight. And remember, this is just a really small snapshot. What we usually do is we have really good interactions. I like this to be a really interactive session, usually, where people talk about, again, we play Chatham House rules, you know, what happens in the session stays in the session, but people get to talk freely about the issues that they're facing. And it's very interesting to get that cross-pollination from other people. So what we've looked at is we needed to understand what it takes to be a leader and how to start putting that into place. We need to consider how to develop teams that are cohesive and work collaboratively, and indeed how we foster trust in those teams too. We need to understand the impact that our self-mastery, or indeed the lack of it, the effect that can have and the impact that can have on others. We need to understand how to accept the hard conversations, because if we seriously do want feedback, we have to be prepared that it's not always going to be positive, and sometimes, in fact, it can be incredibly negative. We also need to set boundaries for ourselves. To me, being, as I keep saying to you, being the last person in the office, and I had a friend who was always the last person in the office at night, and somebody said to him one night, "What do you think is going to be your reward for doing this?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know." They said, "Well, your reward will be flowers sent to your wife when you don't make it home one night." And unfortunately, he died at age 48. So that was a bit cheery. Sorry about that. Let's move on. Finally, one of the things that as a leader you have to always be prepared for is you have to be prepared for changes. Like tonight, we had a few blips and burps and problems through the presentation. You just have to be prepared to roll, to go with the flow. It's really, really, really important. So, you know, make sure that, yes, you might have the parachute packed, just make sure you've got the parachute in the parachute pack, you know. So your leadership journey, I hope, is beginning and developing, and I really hope that I see you in one of these classes where we can talk for longer about developing those parts of leadership that you feel you need to develop. That's it.
Thanks a lot, Joe, for the insightful presentation. There were a couple of themes here that really made me think deeper. But going back to the beginning, I want to ask you about the 4 leadership styles.
Yes.
Okay, intuitively, you think that a mixture of democratic and bureaucratic maybe is the best, but is that what the research shows, or your personal experience?
It's my personal experience. It's really contextual. It absolutely depends on the context that you're working in as well. There are some areas where, you know, it's absolutely has to be about safety, for instance. Then you may need to be absolutely bureaucratic. And sometimes if it's a life and death, you might have to, in fact, take the autocratic route and be a little bit dictatorial about getting stuff done. So it does depend on the context of the organisation. For most of us, I would say that democratic and bureaucratic, that combination is really good. You know, pull in a little bit of laissez-faire if you need to, if you want the team to actually start making decisions for itself, be a self-directed work team. That's a different thing altogether. So it is about, the research shows us it's about the context in which we operate.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have any other questions? I think that means no.
Yes, well, there don't seem to be any other questions. So over to you, Tony.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you, Joe, for this 1-hour session. Thank you to the participants for making time to join us. Hope you enjoyed. Join us tomorrow at the same time when Mario Buju will show us how to build dashboards in finance. Follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter for more information about our events and more digital technology and digital risk insights. And don't forget to share with your friends and colleagues. Thank you very much again.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Joe. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.